Today I'm going to walk you through the mixing and the watercolor timing of creating this vibrant sky. The first thing you see me do on most of my paintings is to wet down the back of the paper and the front of the paper. And that is especially important when it comes to painting a sky, specifically a sky that is a little more complicated than just a few clouds or normal blue sky. When you're painting a sunset, you're thinking about mixing vibrant colors. And timing really comes into play in scenes like this. And so when you wet down both sides of the paper, it gives you more time to work wet into wet. So what I'm doing first is really thinking about the light values of the sky, the subtle little changes in warm and cool. And I'm laying in some of this neutral gray here, and that's some lavender and neutral tint and raw sienna. And then I'm moving into some of the cooler areas, and that is more cerulean. And one thing you'll find when painting skies is when you are painting warm and cool colors, we all know what happens when you mix yellow and blue. We usually get green, right? But if you can mix in something like alizarin crimson or rose madder permanent, something with a little bit more red in it, that will help you avoid your vibrant warm colors turning green. So that's why when I'm painting skies, I like to mix in a little bit of that, especially in the transition areas. I'll use more rose madder permanent to avoid the sky turning green. In order to get a vibrant sunset, you are going to need to get stronger and stronger as we go, but it all starts with this first light wash. So within these purple colors, you're seeing more lavender, more cobalt blue, and more rose madder permanent to get to this color. And that's what's really fun about this, is painting those nice vibrant colors and letting them mix together on the wet paper. As I get towards the top of the sky, there's a deeper, richer blue color, and so I'm using more and more cobalt blue. So we're getting a good base for this, good feeling of light, some nice colors mixing on the paper, all setting ourselves up for the sky and the next stage here, which is introducing some of the darker clouds. And I want to paint this when this is still damp because these soft edges are really important to me. So this is a mixture of neutral tint, cobalt blue, and lavender. And I want to drop these clouds in while that paper is wet because that dampness is so nice in getting soft edges. And there are parts of the cloud near the bottom that are catching some of this light and they are warmer. And so I'm mixing in more rose madder permanent in those areas. If you've ever seen any of my other sky tutorials, you've heard me say, I'm not going to be able to paint the sky exactly as it is in the reference photo. Watercolor is a very fluid medium, and you're about 80 to 85% in control. And so there's some things that are going to happen on the paper because of the timing, because of how much water or paint I'm using on my brush. Those are all variables. And there's a lot of complexity in this sky. So I'm looking at the sky and I'm really thinking about how I can create an impression of the sky. And I'm not trying to create every little cloud exactly as it is. So give yourself a little bit of license to explore and try new things and create those impressions. Don't feel bad if your sky doesn't look exactly like your photo. What's important is soft edges and getting to that right value, the right strength, in order for your sky to look bright and vibrant. I felt like this top right needed a little bit more information, a little bit more something going on. And I'm putting a few little wispy clouds up there. But as you can see, we're nearing the end of the sky. I'm taking a step back, checking on the paper, using a vibrant color like cadmium orange, quinacridone gold. Those are the colors that give me a really big punch of color. Now I don't use a ton of them, but these areas that are really warm in the sky where you're seeing some vibrant light, that is an effect of those vibrant colors. There's some quinacridone gold here, and there's some cadmium orange up here in the sky. Now once I have the sky how I want it, less is more. When it gets close, when it resembles a sky, step back, because it's in this stage of the painting where you see, oh, well, there's a little more cloud here. There's a little more cloud here. This should be a little bit darker. The more you fiddle with it, the less it's going to look how you want, the less pleasing that it's going to look, because it's going to start to look overworked and this paper is going to dry. I'll start to get hard edges if I keep messing with it. So the more fresh that you can paint, the better your skies are going to turn out. That's an important lesson. So the paper is still damp, and I'm going to lay in a little bit of green and start to think about the ground underneath the sky, and that is the next step. So I'm using some raw sienna, some cobalt turquoise, and just laying in some green, the light values of what is on the ground. And in order to really get this sky to stand out and feel vibrant, I will come back in when all this is dry and we'll finish up the ground and really help that light stand out. I did come back and add just a few more little marks up in the clouds to break up some things, add a little bit more of tension up in this part of the sky. But there you have it. That is a look at the first wash of the scene. The paper is still damp. And now I'm going to let it dry, and then I will come back in and we will get into those middle values and darks to bring the scene together. So I talk a lot about my mixture for greens. It's cobalt, turquoise, and raw sienna. That's my standard olive green that you see here. And then if I want more vibrancy, I can use some cadmium yellow to add some vibrancy, or some quinacridone gold. And if I want to cool it down, I can add some lavender or cobalt blue to cool the green down. I keep the mixture very simple and it works for me. So that's a lot of what you're going to see here in this landscape. This is a darker version of that green with some neutral tint. Occasionally I do use a little bit of raw umber as well. So that tree line standing against the light of the sunset, that's so important. You don't want to go too light because, like I said, the darkness, the strength of the ground and other things around the sky are what makes the light believable in the scene. So don't go too weak when it comes to painting the ground underneath your sky. Now I wanted to have a variation here. You can see down where the light effect is the strongest, I have it a little bit warmer. And then as we move away from there, I've kind of darkened it a little bit, added a little bit of coolness. I'm thinking about variety of color even within things like this. I don't want to mix up one green and just use it for all of the trees all over the scene. Okay, I'm adding some more variation and trees here. There's another row of trees that's in front of those background trees. And I'm using a smaller synthetic brush with more paint and less water to get those broken edges. And you can just suggest the foliage, doing some quick brush strokes and pulling upward and letting it become more of a broken mark. And that's a nice way to create even the illusion of distance, because you can see the trees in the background are smoother with a little bit of difference. The trees in the middle ground have more texture. And so that's a subtle thing, but that will help you create a feeling of depth within your landscape paintings. I'm continuing to work that up and add some strength and some broken up marks. And you'll see here, one thing I do from time to time, if it's all looking too plain, I can use my fingernail or a palette knife and I can scratch in some little highlights, some little suggestions of branches, things like that. And that also helps in creating a little more attention here and letting the background look more nondescript. And after I was done with those two rows of trees, I wanted to do a wash over the ground again, not only to strengthen it, but I can kind of direct the viewer's eye throughout the painting with this wash, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'm mixing more green, cobalt turquoise, raw sienna, and I knew that the foreground would need a little bit more texture, so I'm starting there, and I'm using my calligraphy brush, and I can leave a few little bits behind, so it's a process of elimination. I start with leaving more of that first wash behind, and then I chip away at it as I'm deciding what parts I can eliminate. But I wanted to have a lead into the scene over here, so a little more texture in the foreground, and using some of the light value underneath that I paint around to lead us through the painting. So I'm leaving a little bit of difference and attention here in the foreground, and as I get further into the scene, I'm leaving less of these little marks, and it's just going to be smoother with less of those little parts breaking it up. Don't be afraid to glaze over things. That's a part of the painting process. I knew that I would want a little more value on the ground. It adds some complexity and some design to the painting when you are not afraid to glaze over things to get to that final feeling of finish in your work. One thing I did here was I felt like the foreground could use a little bit of variation and some warmth. This is so warm up here in the sky, And I added a little bit of that warmth down here with some burnt sienna and some raw sienna down here in the foreground. That does a few things. It makes this look connected with the warmth that's in the sky, and also that warmth brings that area forward, lets this part sit further back into the background, and that's what I wanted to do there. And at the end, I thought, well, you know, this painting can use a little bit something more in this area of interest. You don't always have to add birds. Sometimes I like adding birds into the scene. That can maybe feel a little cliche to some people, but I think it's a nice way of connecting what's happening on the ground along with what's happening in the sky, and it adds a bit of motion and feeling of life to the painting as well. A few more final touches, and here we are with the finished painting. So take your time with your skies, practice your watercolor timing working into wet. I'm hopeful that you can take some of these things I've shown you here today and use them within your own landscape paintings. Have you ever been really excited about a painting and you get all set up, you find that right reference that you're excited about, and then it's time to go and you feel lost? You ever had that experience? Well, I have a free resource that I want to give to you today that can help with these problems. My 5 steps to plan a successful watercolor painting. I walk you through the crucial planning phase of your painting that will help you understand what you're going to paint first, second, and third. The planning is really so important, especially in watercolor. This medium is harder to correct. It's so immediate. So having that plan is very important. I send you a PDF that you can download. And the great thing about this is you can have it on your phone, you could print it out, and you can take a look at these crucial planning steps before you start each painting. All you have to do is follow this link here and download my 5-step guide to planning a successful watercolor painting.